Good morning, and this is your Winning Women expert interview this week with Robyn Banks, who's a GDPR and compliance person. I'm Rosemary Cunningham. I'm the founder of Winning Women, and I've had my own business since '93, and I've been working with Robyn probably since about 2000, I would guess.
A bit later than that, 2005, 2006.
Right, okay, so we met at a networking group and we talked about compliance, and then it wasn't GDPR, it was something before that. She'll tell you in a minute. And just to say, the reason I've got Robyn here is this is one of these things that can really scare small business people, because you hear about fines, you hear about the things that go wrong, and there's been a lot of hype about it. And the reason I work with Robyn is because she really knows her stuff. She's worked in this area for a very long time. She's very passionate about it, which is really interesting. We aren't. And what I loved was that I got her to do it, or did some of it together, and then I can just leave it. And then if I've got a challenge, I can check in with Robyn. She's our Winning Women expert, so she's kind of the hand on your back. And this has happened to me before when something's arisen, and Robyn's just said, well, I'm a GDPR person, and then she'll help me out. So this is why I've got her here today. So over to you, Robyn. Tell us, what is GDPR?
Well, the term GDPR actually refers to, it's an acronym, so it's the General Data Protection Regulation. Right. But this was the EU regulation that came in 2018. Now, we don't have that completely in our law. In our law, we have the Data Protection Act 2018. We have the UK version of the GDPR, which is a lot smaller. We have the e-privacy regulations in the Privacy and Telecommunications Regulations of 2003, amended in 2011. And those are the ones that control cookies and websites and stuff. So it's all this mishmash of legislation. There's about 3 bits now, which make up UK data protection legislation. So that's what we're actually talking about, is the data protection side of stuff, which is all about personal information. And it's about personal information that's used in a business. Right. So there is a difference between whether you're using data for business purposes or for domestic purposes. Now, a good example of this would be a Christmas card list. So I have 2 Christmas card lists, because I have to write all the ones for my family, for my husband, because his writing is appalling, so I have to do it for him. And I have one for my business. The list for personal use for the family is not covered by this legislation. But the one I use for my business, now I'm a sole trader and I'm not a limited company, but it still counts, is covered by this legislation. So any information you use that relates to a natural person within your business, especially if you're doing it electronically, but it does cover stuff on paper too, is covered by this legislation. So you have to be compliant with this legislation in order to avoid any fines.
Brilliant. So just to tell you, Emmeline's here, and Emmeline is a Pilates and bar teacher up in Billericay. She works from her home, and she started working much more online the last year, so she's here. And the other person who I know really wanted to listen, got 3 ladies listening, was Catherine Miller, who's come out of teaching, and she set up her own business as an autism consultant. So her clients are schools, their individual families. Yeah. So, and then of course there's me. So I've got Winning Women, I've got mailing lists for Winning Women, I've got my own business, my coaching business, and occasionally a therapy client as well. So that's the kind of people we've got on the call today anyway, just to give you an idea.
Right. So they're all going to hold personal data, because you can't run a business without personal data. So an email address is personal data. Any notes that you take about a coaching client or about an autism client or the family, whoever it may be, because it relates to a natural person and you're doing it inside your business, i.e. you get paid for doing it, that is going to be covered by this legislation.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Yeah. So what do we need to know? What do we need to do?
So what do we need to know? Well, the first thing to do is to think about compliance. Now, There are certain requirements. There are two major requirements. One is to pay the ICO fee. Now, the fee system is unique to the UK, and it does cover the whole of the UK. Data protection law covers the whole of the UK, so it includes Scotland as well. It means that we are expected to pay a fee to the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, which is the supervisory authority for this stuff, dependent on the size of business. Now, schools still have to do this. It covers everything. It covers public authorities, doctor surgeries, government departments, as well as all of us private businesses, if you like. And it doesn't matter whether you are a sole trader or a limited company or a charity for that matter, or a not-for-profit, you still have to think about paying the ICO fee. Now, there are 3 tiers to the fee. The lowest tier, which is what I assume most of the ladies watching this will come under, is going to be £40 a year or £35 a year if you pay by direct debit. If you pay by direct debit, you don't have to worry about it because it just rolls over, because it's an annual fee. And we're not exempt, because the exemptions are very, very narrow, very narrow. So for an example of this would be that I do a lot of work, as Rosemary knows, with Lions International. Now, a Lions Club is not exempt from paying the fee, even if they, regardless of whether or not they have charity status, because some do and some don't. Now, they still have to pay the lowest tier of fee, because the exemption for a not-for-profit organisation is only in place if you do not do anything that enriches another person's life.
Wow.
And it's just those few words that make the complete difference and mean that every club in the country has to register.
Wow.
So same with our businesses. We will, if you have 10 or less employees, and that doesn't matter whether you're a sole trader or a limited company or what, if you have 10 or less employees and you process data electronically in any format, so if you are a photographer and you're using a digital camera, that's electronic processing. If you do anything on your phone, that's electronic processing. Laptops, computers, it doesn't matter. It is electronic processing. So if you use emails, if you have a website, if you do anything, as I say, on your phone, you have to be covered by this fee. Now, it's you have to do it through the ICO website, and I can guide you through it when you're ready to do it, to just make sure if you're worried about it. So it's fairly straightforward. I can't do it for you, but once you set it up, then the fee goes through, and as I say, if you pay by direct debit, it's the easiest thing because it just carries on year on year on year. You don't have to worry about it. They will send you a reminder and let you know that the renewal is coming up, so that you can expect the money to go out of your bank account, which is quite handy. And so that's the fee. Now, the fine, if you don't do this, starts at £400.
Wow.
Starts at £400. And they are sending out letters to limited companies at the moment, regardless of size, where people haven't done this. So if you get a letter from the ICO, it is probably not a scam letter.
Wow. So we've got someone here who says, do you have to pay the ICO fee? They went through the questionnaire and they sure it said they didn't need to. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. You've come up as Facebook user. So do you want to tell Robyn what your business is, please, if that's you? And then we can answer that question. Okay. So in the meantime, carry on, Robyn.
Keep going. Right, so that's the fee, basically. So yes, the answer probably, a lot of the times if you use the self-assessment tool, it will say you don't need to register and pay the fee. However, it doesn't take into account the exemptions, and people often, quite innocently, misanswer the questions, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it's 99% of businesses are probably going to need to register. So you'll be very, very lucky if you don't have to do it.
So this is Helen Tovey, who's a life coach and a sole trader.
Right, so you're a life coach. So you collect details about your clients. You will keep records about your clients, even on paper. You will contact your clients, even whether if you don't do it online, it doesn't matter, because even if you do it, so you can see me and Rosemary, this is more personal than it gets. this interview is for business purposes. So therefore, we have to be registered because we're electronically processing the data in my face and Rosemary's face. Yeah. So you're unlikely not to need to register, Helen. I would think that if you use email, you probably have a website. So you're processing data electronically, but you're also collecting, with a life coach, you could be collecting what's called sensitive data. Now, this is now called special category data, and it's anything for which in this country we have anti-discriminatory legislation for. So it is physical, mental health or condition, yeah, which could come into life coaching. It could easily come into life coaching. Sexual orientation, political beliefs, religious beliefs, any criminal records are no longer covered. They're under separate sections of the legislation. But all this information for trade union membership, believe it or not, because we have legislation that you can't discriminate against somebody for being part of a trade union, is included in the special category data. Yeah, I know, it's really weird. It took me ages to work out why. Absolutely ages. But yes, it's all in there. So if you are collecting that sort of data, then especially you do have to register to recognise the fact that, yes, you are doing that.
Right. So pretty much everyone for £35 a year should just register then, shouldn't they?
Yeah. It's the best way to avoid it.
And as you said, if you're in the business of enriching lives or whatever the term was you used, then that covers most people here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right.
Even
so both the ladies,
are charity.
Both Emmeline and Helen now have it on their to-do list. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well,
Next.
You'll get my details at the end, so if you need help with it, just give me a call. Now, the next thing that you need to have, regardless of whether or not you have a website, is a privacy notice. Now, this used to be called a privacy policy. It's now called a privacy notice. And the reason for that is because it makes much more user-friendly. If we see the word policy, we all tend to go, that's legal, I'm not going to bother reading that. Whereas if we see a notice, it's much more user-friendly. That's why they changed it, basically. And they changed it in 2018 when this current law came in. There are a whole list on the ICO website of concepts they want you to consider including in your privacy notice, but some of them have to be there. So your contact information has to be there. The lawful basis for which you process data has to be there. It has to be short as possible, and it has to be in plain English, so no legal language. So I've just thrown a piece of legal language at you in terms of the lawful basis for processing. And it's important to understand this particular concept. There are 6 concepts of lawful basis listed in the legislation. Just because the first one happens to be consent does not mean that you necessarily process data for that lawful basis. You have to process data for one or more of the 6, so you can pick which of the 6 to use. Now, most of us in business will use the second one listed, which is contract. Yeah? So if we are buying or paying for something, that's a contract. If you go down to the local supermarket and buy a loaf of bread, that's a contract because you're handing over funds and you expect to get goods in return for it. The same with what we do in terms of services. We expect to get something for our money. That is a contract. Whether we sign a contract or not, it's still a contract. So we will process data for the lawful basis of a contract, which makes things much easier than trying to always seek consent. Consent is very complicated, and I'll come on to that in a bit because it's a common area of concern.
Okay.
So for the privacy notice, we need to have that in there. We also have to have in there your cookies. Now, obviously, if you don't have a website, we don't have to worry about cookies. But if you do have a website, we do what's called a cookie audit, which is to discover which cookies your website is using. Now, ladies, these are wonderful because they're fat-free, they're chocolate-free, they're chocolate chip-free, which is a bit unfortunate. But you don't put any weight on with these ones. They are literally internet files that the internet uses to show, even we're running cookies at the moment, to show my face and Rosemary's face on the screen for you and to run this meeting. It uses cookies to do it. But they're essential cookies. It doesn't work without them. They aren't included in the law. It gets quite complicated. So what we do is we just check to see which cookies your website is using, and then make sure that your privacy notice includes an appropriately worded paragraph. There is very rarely a need to have a cookie bar on the bottom of the screen when you go into a website. Very rarely is it needed, because it's only needed if you process a lot of a certain type of cookies, and your website shouldn't be doing that. Advertising is a problem, but we just have to work around that. And so we have to be able to, these cookies, we have to be able to say yes or no to. We have to be able to say, no, we don't want you using them. But this doesn't mean to say that we can switch off all cookies. We have the right to do so. We have the right to switch off cookies that are optional, if you like. But we don't want people to switch off analytical cookies or security cookies. So we just have to make sure that those are mentioned in the privacy notice so that people are aware of what we're doing with their data that's being used in those terms. We don't necessarily need their consent to process the data in that way, because they choose to go on the website and they know through the privacy notice that that's how you're processing the data. The other information that has to go on there is how I can get my information from you if I want to, and the Information Commissioner's details, because we have the right always as individuals to go to the Information Commissioner if we want to. It doesn't mean to say you're going to get fined. It doesn't mean to say that, they're going to come hammering on your door, but we have to have that information in there. They expect to see it. Now, there are actually 8 to 10 of these concepts that are listed in the ICO website, but I know which ones to pick out and which ones to leave behind, depending on what my client does. Yeah, so we word it appropriately for you. And that helps us to meet another one of the major functions of this legislation. We have to do everything in terms of privacy by design and by default, which means it has to apply to your business. So, Rosemary, I might have a client that does the same thing as you do in terms of winning women, but the privacy notice we write is slightly different, because then we tailor it to the actual business itself. And it's very important that this is done in this way, because then that meets privacy by design and by default. Despite the fact that you will find templates for a privacy notice on the ICO website, the ICO guidance says don't use templates.
Wow. So can I just interject here then? So you did mine for me. It didn't cost me very much, that I do know. And I've never really had to go back and redo it, because my business hasn't changed dramatically over the last few years. But is this something that many people manage to do adequately themselves?
No.
Oh, really?
Really?
Okay.
Because you tend to find people put too much information in there, which can get you into trouble, which makes it too long. You can find that people put the wrong type of information in there, which can get them into trouble. So we have to have certain things in there. Now, and as I say, yes, okay, so if we were a solicitor's firm, we might use legal language, but we still wouldn't quote parts of the Act. Just wouldn't do it. We'd just use different language to actually express the same concept. It's not supposed to be written in legal language, because we're all supposed to be able to understand it. If you go into too much detail, then actually you could be causing problems for yourself. So, for example, we're supposed to put in there that we're using personal data. Now, people think that this means they have to list the types of personal data that they use. So, name, address, email address, for example. Yeah. The problem with that is that doesn't then leave you free to use other pieces of personal data in your business, because you've said you're using name, address, and email address. Right. So if you've stated that, that's all you can use. You can't collect or use any other data. Now, that then impacts, especially we've got a lady here who's a life coach, haven't we? Now, she'll be collecting a lot of other data on somebody, even just in conversation with them. So we have to make sure that we keep it fairly general in the privacy notice, or just general enough to allow the business to still operate and do what it needs to do without having to worry about, well, have I covered that in my privacy notice, so that I can still process the data.
Got you.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to what I asked you myself right in the beginning: is what's the sort of the kind of investment that a one-man band with a really simple business like a life coach would cost to have this done professionally?
Right. So I am not a legal beagle. I am not legally trained. I am an implementation expert. So I don't charge legal fees. I don't charge anything like a solicitor would charge you to do this. And they're going to apply the law. They're not necessarily going to make it fit to your business. What I do is the implementation side of it, and I charge somewhere between £180 and £250, depending on what you do, depending on what your business is like, depending on whether it's electronically based or not, and then go from there.
Right. So as an essential then for someone who's got a business, that's something that you really need if you want to do this properly to put aside.
Yeah, I mean, if I've priced it so that even sole traders coming new into business can afford to use me. Because once I've done it for you and you've got everything in place, including the accountability document, which is something you have to have in the background, including any text for the footer of your emails and your forms, anything like that you might use. So that's a contact form on a website, or it might be a form that a life coach uses to just gather information from a client. Anything like that, we can fit it all in that package. So it depends what as I say, what you do. But I've deliberately priced it. I don't charge VAT because that would be a nightmare. I'd have to charge it on some things and not on other things. So I don't charge VAT, and I keep it low so that people can afford to use me. And then they know they don't have to worry about it once it's in place. You don't have to worry about it anymore until, like Rosemary found out, they changed the flaming law.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. So I thought I'd bring that in because if it was me listening, I'd be wondering that because it's all sounding, I tried to make this sound very simple, but it's not as simple as I thought it was going to be because I haven't done it for a while. Okay, so we've got that bit sorted, Mudette. So what else do we need to know about? I know one thing was business cards. I give you my business card with my personal information on it.
Yeah.
One of the questions is, does that give you the right to email me? And that you had an interesting answer to that one.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. We are in the realms of consent here, ladies. So if I give you my business card at a business network meeting, I am giving you my business card for the purpose of you to stay in contact with me. Right? That is my consent for you to use the information that's on that business card for business purposes. So even if you have to transfer, even if you want to hand my details on to somebody else, you're perfectly at liberty to do that. You don't have to ask my permission to do so. And in fact, asking my permission would be seen as being forced consent because you've asked me again for consent that I've already given you by giving you the business card. And that, ladies, is illegal.
Wow.
So this is why consent is so complicated. You don't need consent to have somebody on your mailing list. They've signed up to your newsletter. If they've signed up to your newsletter, that's consent to use the data. If you want to increase your list and you want to ask people in a closed group like Winning Women for whether or not they want to sign up to your newsletter, then you can. Yeah? There's nothing stopping you from doing that. That's perfectly legal to do so. It's when we go out into the wider world and we start using Google or we start using lists from companies that sell lists for this kind of thing that it gets a bit more complicated. So really, if you want to do that kind of thing, the best thing to do is to check in with me first, because the best way to do it is a certain way. There's no reason you can't do it. Yeah? And this is where everybody went wrong when GDPR came in 2018, because they all went, oh, we need consent to process data. And we all got all those shocking emails that said, I need your consent to keep me on your database. Well, no, but actually, if I don't reply to that email, you have to remove me from your list, because that's with me withdrawing my consent for you to process that data. So don't do it. Don't send out those emails in the first place, and then you can carry on sending people. We all have the right to withdraw our consent at any time. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But and I know this. Yeah, that was my advantage because I was already working with you. My colleagues were sending that email out, and 90% of their list wasn't replying at all. So they lost 90% of their list. I didn't do it, so I didn't lose 90% of my list.
Exactly.
But you have to have a very visible thing on there, which is the unsubscribe, isn't it, on your emails?
Yeah, if you're doing emails, you have to keep have an unsubscribe in there. Newsletters, especially, you have to have an unsubscribe in there, so that just to remind people they can unsubscribe at any time they want to. But emails, you have to have a special footer anyway for your email going out. So if I'm sending you an email, Rosemary, then there needs to be a footer on the bottom of it, just to say that I'm working in compliance with the law, and that you can get more information from me if you want to, which is my privacy notice. So if you get in touch with me for further information, then I'll just send you a copy of my privacy notice that tells you how I process data.
And that's really interesting, because I've changed how I send my emails out. So I must go back and look at that now.
Make sure you got that footer on the bottom.
Yeah, and also I'm probably moving over to MailerLite, because I want to be able to do more sequences. Automatic sequences, so I need to make sure that's on there. So that's something I need to get back to you about, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, and automatic sequencing is automatic processing of the data, so we need to make sure that's covered in your privacy notice as well.
Right. Okay.
So we need to, yeah. So if you change the way you're doing it, once you're a client, if you change the way you're doing anything, then it's worth running it by me and saying, is there any implication here? And I'll come back and say either no or yes. Now, to do that, it's not going to cost you a penny, because I don't charge for that kind of inquiry. I'm only going to start charging you if it costs me an hour of my time to start working it out for you. Right? And then it's worked out on my hourly rate. And then so I don't charge people for just answering questions. You're a client, and that's what I do. I offer that service. So yeah, that's all included in your upfront cost, if you like. But I'm only going to charge you if, as I say, if there's a project which is then going to cost me an hour of my time, because then obviously my time is chargeable.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And this is why I got Robyn on, if you're listening, because I know she's very honest and upfront about all this kind of thing. And you wouldn't rip anyone off, would you, woman? It's just not in your nature. So, Robyn, what else do we need to know? Is there anything else you feel like you really must say here and now about this?
Right. The only other thing is there's been a lot of hype recently about changes to the law. Anything that comes in is not coming in for a couple of years anyway. It's not that long since they changed it last time, because 2018 was when the last law came in. That was written in 2016. And actually, that's the first change we'd had since 1998-2000. So any changes are not going to come in immediately. Are they going to be able to repeal the whole thing? No, they're not going to get rid of it. I'm still going to be here and I'm still going to have a business. Because if we don't have it in place, we can't work with the rest of the world. India's now getting a law. Well, if they're putting one in place, then it must be necessary to have one to be able to work with other countries. So yes, it's, this stuff is going to be around. So we really need to consider doing it. There's other things that you need to have in place, but again, I can discuss those with you at the time. But the main ones are the privacy notice and the fee. So then we then move on to other things that you have to keep and just hold inside your business, but they all follow on from those two things.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So end of the day is you've got to pay your fee. You need your privacy notice in place, and you need to make sure that privacy notice really is tailored to your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are templates, but the ICO don't encourage you to use them.
No. And right. You've also got to work out whether, if you use a template, you've got to work out which bits don't fit your business.
Yeah.
And that can get very complicated and take a lot of time. Whereas, if I can just give you some text for you to just slap on your website under a separate page, then you're laughing, aren't you? Because it's going to cover you for whenever. And my professional indemnity insurance covers all my advice. So, I know, and I've been doing it since 2005 on my own. I've been doing it actually in the field since 2000, because I was doing it in the Foreign Office before that. So, I've got all the knowledge and the implementation there, that I've been doing it long enough now that, people know that I know what I'm talking about. Even the ICO know I know what I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Exactly what these interviews are about, really getting someone who knows their stuff, who can save us stress and money in the long run, even if it's part of your upfront investment in your business. Thank you so much, Robyn.
You're
and
welcome.
Just to say, Next week, I have a lady called, you know what, I haven't got her name in front of me. That's really rude. I've only spoken to her once, but she's brilliant. She's a highly sensitive person and she's an empath, and she coaches people in that that is one of their superpowers. So we're talking to her next week. So if you come across that spectrum, and I would guess probably about 60% of winning women do, then have a listen to that. That's next Monday evening. Then we've got Emma Nichols, and her business is Escape to Tranquility. She's an Essex lady who now has a retreat in the south of France, and her big passion is to help other people leave that stressy environment and find a different solution, whether it's in life or business or both coming together. And the last person I've just booked, and we've got Louise Simpson, who's our professional organizer. And the last person I've just booked is a friend of mine from Tucson, Arizona, Catherine Estar. She's coming up for 77. And I think Catherine is just coming into the most important part of her career. She's been working with priestess work and women for the last, at least 30 years. And she helps us to really be in our intuitive power in our body. She teaches Tai Chi and Qigong, how to really be in our power in our body so people will listen to us, so we can be heard, and all that good stuff. She's an absolute top of the world friend of mine. Right, how do we find you, Robyn? Somebody's asking. You say it quickly, and then we'll put it in the notes as well.
Robyn, ROBYN, at Adavista, as it says on the screen, ADAVISTA.com. That's my email address. If you want to have a quick look at my website, it does need updating, but it's basic information's there. It's www.adavista.com.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
If you've got any questions, put them in the chat or email Robyn directly. But yeah, let's get this stuff sorted out, ladies. It's a bit like your accounts, isn't it? You need someone in your corner who you can really trust and lean on, even if it's only once every couple of years in Robyn's case. And believe me, she's got big shoulders. She's supported me many a time. And the thing is with Robyn, she's always there. Now, you phone her, text her, she'll get back to you within a day, unless she's up a mountain somewhere, which even then she'll probably normally say, Rosemary, I'm up a mountain. I'll talk to you next week. Yeah. She's really on the ball. So, and to have other people like that in our court, for me as a business owner, is probably the most important thing. You're very welcome. I think that's Helen saying we've got brilliant. Thank you, ladies. Emmeline says thank you both. Gorgeous. Thank you for joining us, you lovely women. Yeah. Thank you, Robyn. And I'll see you all next week. Oh, and I'm back to do a mindset. I'm starting Mindset Monday again. I'll be back at 6 o'clock today. See you then.
Okay. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much, Robyn. Bye.